Welcome to a podcast celebrating Scottish culture and entertainment, which is here to sing the praises of books, films, comedy, music, theatre, exhibitions, telly, poetry and all that jazz. I'm Nicola Meehan. I'm an arts writer and broadcaster, and I'll give you the lowdown on what's coming up, what's happening now, what came before and what we love, which is to say that every week I'm here to give you a kick up the arts. I'm joined for a blether by brilliant guests in fab art spaces around the country, and this week I'm at Dundee's Cooper Gallery celebrating the city's she-town history with two local legends. Gayle Anderson's a writer, broadcaster and the producer of the stunning Looking For Esther podcast, which is absolutely vital listening. Back in the day, Gayle worked at Dundee's DC Thomson as the pop editor and the agony aunt of Jackie magazine. B. Charlotte is a songwriter, performer and pop star on the rise who makes music and runs her own label from the city and who has just released a new single with DJ Arielle free. Charlotte's glorious debut album, Help and Fictional Doubts, was released earlier this year and has led to her crashing the American album charts. She's currently at number 2 thanks to Rodwave's sampling of its closing track, Will Anybody Be Out There? We had a wander around a fab exhibition called the Ignorant Art School Sit in 4, Outside the Circle, which celebrates feminist and LGBT resistance, collective action and the power of art. It features work from Audre Lorde, Derek Jarman, Sam Ainsley and Maud Salter alongside grassroots media, tapestry, video footage and some really fascinating archive material documenting radical, brilliant Dundee women like Ethel Moorhead and Mary Brooksbank. But I started with B. Charlotte and this awesome chart success. After all, it's not every day you're in the Billboard Top 200 ahead of Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift. I do want to start by saying that we're here to celebrate Dundee women in She-Town and some of the city's legends and their dialogues with art across the world and across time. But I want to start with an icon sitting right around this table who's currently sitting at number 2 in the US Billboard album charts. B. Charlotte. How are you? Congratulations. This is amazing. Rodwave and you.
I know. It's very, very surreal. I'm a bit like somebody is going to jump out and go, this is a joke. Do you know what I mean? I feel like, I don't know, as you both know, like, I guess in this industry there's loads of ups and downs and you know what I mean, you ride that wave all the time. But yeah, I'm convinced somebody's going to be like, no, this is all a joke.
It's just utterly wonderful. I said to my kids, because I adore your album, I play it on, it's beautiful. Will we call it purple? Is it violet?
Yeah,
is a specific colour
purple
of
violet. I think ASI Records, who made it, they've called it violet, so we'll go with
I've just
purple.
noticed that it matches your glasses.
Yeah, I just love purple.
It's your signature colour. So we listened to your album a lot, but this morning when I said, I'm going up to Dundee, I'm going to see Gayle and B. Charlotte, oh, amazing. I said, do you know about our collaboration with Rodwave? And they were just like, what? Had it on, blown away. It's incredible. How did it happen?
So I believe one of the producers on the track heard my song on the internet and decided to sample it and then they made the tune with Rodwave. And then, of course, they asked me if that was all right. And then it's on Rodwave's latest album. So it's all been very quick. It's been a pretty quick turnaround. And then I knew from Rod's previous success that it was going to be big news. I mean, it was going to be successful, like his album. But it's definitely blown me away. And I keep checking every day, like the numbers going up, and I'm just like, there's actual real millions of people listening to that song. Like that it's something you might dream of. But you don't really let yourself. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just like, wow, it is
incredible. And millions of people have been listening to it, but probably none more so than myself. And the other legend that we've got around the table with us, Gayle Anderson. I know you're a huge fan of B. Charlotte as well. I just love that this tradition of Dundee women's voices resonating across the globe is still very prevalent, isn't it? Always has been.
It is. And I love your new album. I just love it. I love the fact, I think you should get a t-shirt if you haven't already with Woodstock, Berlin, Dundee. I want one.
Right, I'll do it. Even if just for you, Gayle.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
Woodstock,
okay.
Berlin, Dundee.
Right.
Has to be done, doesn't it? Well, listen, it's lovely that in this week of sky-high American chart success, we're holed up in the wonderful Cooper Gallery in Dundee, your hometown, Charlotte.
Yes.
Yours as well, Gayle. And my half hometown, because my dad always lived up there, I swear. So I count myself at least half Dundonian.
Yeah.
But what an afternoon we have had at this exhibition. I think we all lost ourselves in the very first glass cabinet before we got any further, and it harks back to Mary Brooksbank. Now, Gayle, you have a long and enduring relationship with the woman, her poetry, her politics. You've flown the flag for a long time for her.
Oh, I mean, I first fell in love with her, I think I was about 10, and I was in Mingus Hill Library with my granddad. We went every Friday, and I wanted to be a poet at this point. I was, as I say, about 10, and I picked up this book of Sidlaw Breezes.
Wow.
You know, and the cover's got a picture of Mary, all 5 foot of her in her cardi, you know, with a face, you know, you wouldn't take a broken pay packet home to her, you know, that kind of face. And I just, the simplicity of the poems, but the deep sort of message, the social message hit me. And I thought, I can do that. It was this thing of, I mean, I couldn't really, but you know, but I tried because it wasn't like Yeats or Byron, or it was approachable, and it mentioned places, the poems that I knew, Balgay Hill, you know, the mills that my family had worked in. So it gave you this creativity, you thought you could do it.
Yeah.
And I loved her from then. I just think she's a remarkable woman. The only woman whose words are on the Scottish Parliament building.
Quite.
She's the only one from the Jute Mill song. And I managed to get her poem, the Jute Mill song, the song, into the
Scottish
songbook. That's it.
Yeah. I love that you just happened upon the words and the geography of them and the emotion of them just utterly packed a punch for you. When did you first encounter Mary Brooksbank, Charlotte? Because she's played quite a big part in your life and music as well.
Yeah, I guess probably, I definitely, I feel like subconsciously would have heard her name, probably growing up and then in school. But then for me, we were trying to remember exactly when this was, but I think it was around 2018, 2019, and I did a project with V&A Dundee, and it was in collaboration with my auntie, who's actually a scientist. And we made a bit of a exhibition, really, installation. And my part of that was researching some inspiring women from Dundee and around Scotland. And then I researched them quite a bit and made songs about them. And then that was part of the sort of installation as well. And yeah, that was when I first, I guess, really got into Mary Brooksbank and her story, and was just like, similarly to you, it's like you're just blown away that somebody this remarkable and what she was doing at her time. Yeah. And then to think, well, that's in Dundee, that's happened here. And then also at the same time I was thinking, it's just wild that we're still having to fight for some of those same rights. Like, in Scotland or across the world, even, or just to have our voices heard, or when you do speak up and have your voice heard, you get in trouble, you know what I mean? You get your opportunities taken away from you for talking about passionately something you believe in. And I think, she, out of all the women I did research, and that was the one definitely that resonated with me the most, and I took inspiration from her Oh Dear Me, the world is not divided, in my song that I wrote as well, and it's called it Hard Lines. And I loved doing that project, and it still has such a special place. And the songs, I'm yet to do something with them, so I've always thought I would maybe put them all in a wee EP and get that out there as well.
That'd be good.
Totally. Because I love the backstory of it all as well. Like, it's kind of
and it is so rooted in Dundee. But it's interesting that we find out about these people, and it does tend to be women that this happens with more than men. Maybe a bit later than we should. They're not necessarily in the curriculum. They're not necessarily taught in schools, even in the history classes. And again, an exhibition like this is vital for that, because it's an international, exhibition in many ways. It goes back decades, centuries. But in another way, it's so rooted in She-Town and the stories of people like Mary Brooksbank. There's also an utterly brilliant, we're going to get beyond the first cabinet maybe, but I'm staying there a bit longer because it was mesmerising. There's a wonderful thing which is almost like a kind of proto-punk literary fanzine, Gayle, and this is like in the 1848 or something, a women's miscellany. And so they were just making their own formats and platforms to celebrate their writing and to distribute it, which is fascinating all back then. Yeah, I mean, Dundee, this She-Town thing is wonderful, and I think it's really true. Yeah. I mean, Seamus Heaney said when he came to Dundee Uni, Dundee, he meant the students, is a city with its head in the clouds and its feet on the ground. But I think you could apply that to all Dundonians, because feet very much on the ground, but creatively we're not frightened
to speak poetry or speak about songwriting, or there's collaboration with that. There's, it's not a hidden thing. So even back then with these women, let's get a magazine out there,
I just love that. It was called La Bouquet, or Dundee Ladies Miscellany. It's just wonderful. You touched on something lovely to veer off slightly, which was a few weeks ago in the podcast with James Robertson and Andrew Vaslick, two other wonderful locals. And they were speaking, they were speaking about the great Michael Mara, who's another complete, brilliant example of someone with their feet in the ground. But my goodness me, the imagination, the characters are just utterly wonderful. But it's also that aspect of doing it yourself that they're doing. So in the 1840s, we've got these women going, where are our publications? Where can we put our words down? How can we distribute them? Yeah. And they're doing it. And actually, in many ways, as you say, some things have never changed. Here you are in Dundee, you got your own label, you're making your voice heard in your own way, on your own terms, in your hometown. That's really, really powerful.
I guess, like, probably for us all, there's something, you always have something within you that you want to try and get out there, or you try and do, and that for me was always something that, like, I had a thought. I remember even saying to my mum or my auntie that when I was like 16, 17, I would just love to open like a music school in Dundee or something that's like accessible for anyone can come. You don't need to pay, it doesn't matter what your financial situation is, it's not about that. You're not needing to train to go and do classical music, for example, but I always knew something was in there, and then obviously I've not done that yet, but
you're starting
the label kind of is that, like, gives me that sort of thing of something I've wanted to do for a while, and I just think it's so important. Like, it is such a difficult industry to navigate, and a lot of times you don't have people that are looking out for your best interest, or that want to help you as well. Like, I found that so much was like, you think it's very closed, and I feel like for me, like, coming from Dundee, I didn't have just a direct door hand into the industry. It was like I didn't know anything about it or anyone. Yeah. So, like, I feel like then when you go to, like, London, for example, or whatever, and I'd go and do loads of writing sessions, I would still feel so on the outside of it, because it's just like a totally different. It's a different lifestyle, a different way. I think when you've got to.
But it's interesting because I saw something in here. It's a strange segue, but bear with me. I saw.
We're here for it.
Well, I saw in the manifesto, Sam's manifesto.
Sam Ainsley's manifesto. Yeah. Utterly wonderful. Yeah.
Right, there was a line and it stuck with me, and I've just read it, and you're saying about, you didn't know anyone, you were on this outside, you felt an outsider. And it said, being on the periphery isn't a bad thing. Yeah. It's a good thing. And actually, being on the periphery, you're forged in steel.
Yes.
And I just thought that was it was really powerful. I've just read it.
Yeah, I utterly loved that. So yes, about Sam Ainsley. Yes, she lights up, her work absolutely lights up Gallery 2 upstairs. So we've got kind of 3 galleries all celebrating this wonderful exhibition. And so this is her manifesto for the Ignorant Art School, sitting number 4 outside the circle. One of its other arguments is that we have to fight to retain joy, no matter what the circumstances are. And that is a radical act. And we really, really need that too, don't we? And again, I think that's something you really embrace in your music. Yeah. It's very heartening, it's very enlivening, it's very radiant, and it's fine to dance, isn't it? Yeah. We've got to dance. Forget the mess we made, let's eat it for the good times. Make it rain and lemonade. We're the architects, we manifest, we build it for ourselves. Let's eat it for the good times. I guess we might as well.
I think that's the thing, like, I've always written songs out of, like, things that are difficult, things that make me sad, things that I'm angry about. Like, that's just always how I've tried to cope with things. But then I got to a point where it's like, well, if I want to make pop music out of that, and I want to dance to it, and I want to be able to make a music video where I'm dancing to it, then that's totally fine. And
it is, exactly.
I said I've been listening to it a lot recently, and it's really sort of uplifting. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of, it gives gives you power as well. You feel that it puts a spring in your step, you know. And I love Good Times.
Oh.
I think, you know, like it should always rain pink lemonade.
Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, that should be your mantra.
Yeah.
It always does in Dundee, as far as I'm
Yeah, it does. We try.
in my long experience of it. But yeah, it's so lovely that there are so many different ideas within this exhibition, from the word go on placards, in fanzines, and paintings on the walls, and these various exhibits of grassroots press and posters that people have made. But again, it comes back to making your presence felt and having that DIY spirit, because it's easier not to, Charlotte, right? It would be easier not to do these things, not to have the label, actually sometimes not even to put the record out, because there's so much emotional and financial investment that it takes a lot.
Oh, definitely. Like I recorded the album at the end of 2020 when we were allowed to go. We were allowed to go to the studio, and that was about it.
Wow,
but I recorded the album the end of 2020, and then it never came out, obviously, until 2024.
Sure.
So it's been a long process, and a big part of that was me perfectionism and going back into and never being able to just fully finish it. But then, the self-doubt throughout it all was pretty horrific. But I guess, like, I did get to a point where I thought, it'd just be easier if I just didn't do this.
Yeah.
But then,
really,
you put it out, and then you do feel better. It is that relief. It is that release even as well. And I think that, like, I know for a lot of people with art or creativity, it is that thing. It's like that process is the really hard part. And then once the album's out, I must have listened to it millions of times before it came out. The album's out. Have I listened to it since? No. But I'm like, other people can listen to it. I've listened enough, and I don't want to hear a bit where I'm like, oh God, I should have done that. So I'm just like, crack on.
Actually, though, that is a very, very good point, which is there has to come a point where you do have to put it out.
Yeah.
And if it's your own label, you don't have the same deadline necessarily.
No.
So you have to give yourself one. And that's always been there. Even if it's self-imposed, it's so important to art, whether that's a poster that's being handmade or if that is the Dundee Women's Miscellany back in 1848. They would have had a deadline,
I'm
right?
sure. Yeah, no, it is important. And like you say, it's great. I love being independent again, love it. But then the downsides are you don't have somebody maybe saying, right, Charlotte, you need to do this, doing that. So it can be good to obviously have that that sort of structure with it. But I think for me, having now been on both sides of it and being with Sony and now back to independent again, I just have such a different outlook than what I did. And like when I signed that deal, I would have been, I don't know, 20, 21, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then I just feel like a totally different perspective where I'm not chasing a record deal anymore, which I think helps, because I know for a lot of young artists, when you've never experienced it, you don't know what that's going to be like. So you're like trying to, but
there's always the expectation as well, isn't there, that the bigger thing and the more institutionalised something is, the better it is for you. But I mean, Gayle, you've worked across the board. We met when we both wrote for the Herald, and we certainly had deadlines in those days, most of which were met
by staying up all night after being in the bar.
Sounds good.
Yes, that was our lives. And of course, the great DC Thomson up here in Dundee. You were more on Jackie magazine. Minnie the Minx, are we having her as one of the legends of She-Town?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely. I think it's important.
Minnie the Minx,
Thomson, right? Should be here
but
somewhere.
DCs were wonderful for women too.
Yes.
Still are. Like I was editing Jackie in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
They just say, crack on. Give it a go. I was pop editor. There was no interview process. Yeah. They saw talent in you, or they saw something in you, and they said, have some free rein. Yeah. And, they let you be quite crazy. I mean, we were wild. It was like a permanent sleepover in the Jackie office. I mean, dancing round the desks on a Friday afternoon to Hazy Fantasy, John Wayne is Big Leggy.
About 7-inch.
And they didn't say, they should be sitting down, let's send for HR. No, it was like, they need to be creative.
Yeah, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. That might be my manifesto. Crack on.
Yeah.
Just, honestly, the fact that you were the pop editor of Jackie, you were the editor, you were the agony aunt.
Yeah.
Kathy and Claire.
That's Kathy and Claire.
I mean, anything's
Wow.
possible, right? It's so fab.
That's
and
it.
it didn't matter. It didn't have to be that idea that when you're down in London or you're somewhere else, you have had to have had a certain upbringing or education. It's like you're on the ground here, you get involved, you wire in, you work hard, you crack on, and you end up hanging about with Alan Cumming on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
What was it?
His
keyboard.
Well, I worked with
Alan
Alan.
Cumming.
He worked in DC's,
Right.
and he used to love Dollar. So he'd play, he'd bring in his keyboard and play Handheld in Black and White by Dollar of an afternoon. We'd have a wee sing-song. That's when we weren't sending him out for ice cream, because he was the junior, so he had to go for all the ice cream order.
Quite right, do as he's told.
You know, DC's, I was from Mingus Hill. I was from a housing scheme. And I used to read Jackie like everyone else at that time.
Yeah.
And I thought this was all happening in London. Little did I know that I just needed to take the number 22 bus into town.
Wild.
And there it was all going on.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
it was crazy
yeah.
not to know that. Yeah.
I think to find that, at whatever point you find that things have been happening where you're from is really, really powerful. So you encountering Mary Brooksbank, Charlotte, or a band like The Associates, you know, the fact that it's like, wait a minute, and sometimes you don't know in real time. Danny Wilson, of course, you know, it's like, wow. It makes it feel more possible.
Definitely.
Less distant.
Yeah, definitely. I think, because I remember when I left school sort of a year earlier. I left after 5th year, and I knew I wanted to do music, but I didn't really know how that was going to happen, and there wasn't much on offer in Dundee in terms of like studying wise. There was obviously Perth College, it did music courses and stuff, but it was sort of like, this thing of, you need to go somewhere else to do that. I definitely had a bit of that, but I always knew though that I didn't think I would survive London. So I never did. But I did move to Glasgow and studied there, which was great because I studied music business actually to try and learn about it, because I said I had no clue. So that was really good, and that for me just opened up a new world. And I guess like moving to a new city so young, I think I was only 18. But it was really good, and I think and then when I signed to Sony, I waited a wee bit, but then I did move to Berlin for a couple of years as well, and it was one of those things of like, if I don't do it now, then I'll never do it.
Exactly.
And it's a brilliant city. It's a brilliant place. But since being back home in Dundee, I've been back now a good few years, and I'm just like, I don't want to be anywhere else. It is home. Like it just feels like you can just like breathe and relax. And then I would never have written that album if I never came home. Like all those songs were written back home. In my room. Like I think it's just you do have that desire to go elsewhere and try and find whatever the hell it is you're looking for. Like you say,
and it's here.
And then you're like, oh my goodness, I just needed to. So I think I resonate with that big time.
When it rains, look for rainbows. In the dark, find the stars. Everyone has their ups and downs, and sure we have ours. Doesn't mean we are broken. We have something worth holding. I look for rainbows in the dark.
I love the fact that you're saying you wouldn't necessarily have written this album if you hadn't been back in Dundee, and it's an absolutely utterly forward-looking contemporary album. But I do also think that there's this wonderful sound that Dundee has. It rings out with the voices of people like Mary Brooksbank, Gayle, and of course the great Billy Mackenzie, but also of the Timex workers, because so many of them were women out protesting, of the suffragettes. Now there's some brilliant coverage of the suffragettes invading Ladybank. The language is utterly brilliant. They're either completely demonised or kind of made into cartoons. It's like they can't be taken seriously either way. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, the suffragette coverage is brilliant here as well. I'm actually wearing, as you can see today, I'll describe for the listeners. I'm wearing a t-shirt for my daughter. Shout out to Erin.
Hi, Erin.
And it's of Olive Walton, who is a suffragette who came up from London specifically to Dundee and threw a ball through the window of George King George and Mary's carriage, 1914. And the pictures of her being huckled, as we say in Dundee.
She's been huckled, all right.
Yeah, she's being huckled by 2 policemen and led away. And the T-shirt says, "Do not appeal, do not beg, do not grovel." Which is another mantra for us today.
Oh, it's utterly perfect. But again, getting your voice heard.
Yeah.
There was a brilliant article in The Scotsman written by the fab chief creator here, Sophia, that was saying, many ways the Dundee women had their voices heard. There were proto-hecklers as well. They're really, really good at heckling. And we've got some coverage. Again, it's kind of cartoonified of Ethel Moorhead, our famous suffragette. I think among her brilliant notoriety, she threw an egg at Winston Churchill, not a stone's throw, indeed an egg's throw from here, very, very close by. But she also was discovering, apparently, smashed a glass case up the Wallace Monument in Stirling, which is not unlike my wedding day. In fact, I got married up there and things were broken. I was doing it for the suffragettes. It was just a few years later. But so many of these actions still chime today, and it's like you're saying, Charlotte, in many ways things really haven't changed nearly as much as we might hope they have. Yeah. Still got a shout.
Yeah, definitely. I think now it's kind of, I guess, there was a time when people would be more so taken to the streets and doing those actions, but now it's mostly online, which is kind of, you're having to shout out amongst everything, and it's all a bit of a big mess because it's just a big boiling pot of so many different opinions and things get miscommunicated, and you're like, no, I didn't mean that, I'm a good person, I just want good things for everyone. But I think it's like, now it's, you're sort of shouting, that's what it sort of feels like anyway.
Remotely. You're sort of shouting remotely, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like the marches were great. This exhibition reminded me of that. All the marches I've been on, because believe it or not, I like a wee march. You won't be surprised. And I remember just down the road again, just a placards throwaway. my mum and I lying on the road in about early 2000s for the
looking well for it.
The Iraq,
Okay.
So we went to the big one in Glasgow, which was amazing, and the power of that. And then they had one in Dundee, and we thought, well, we have to support our city. So we ended up, lying across the road. Wow. So and the police were trying to pick people up, but that power you don't get online. I know you exactly don't. What you're saying,
or the community feel of it. You don't. Everything's a bit more divided. But I think when there is a time to step out or get on the streets, I feel like Dundee is really, really good at that, and we've seen that obviously recently. And as well, I've been a part of a few times the Reclaim the Night marches, which is always a really good turnout in Dundee, and I've been at a lot of them over the years.
Activism.
I feel like we're saying that about Dundee women, and I feel like about Dundonians, Dundee in general, like we're not afraid to sort of speak out and say, wait a minute, that's not fair on that person, or that's not right. Like people, we want to see injustice, and we're like, no, wait a minute, like we can.
That's it, and articulating that through art, in paper, and again, although we're speaking specifically about Dundee, because we're here, what's utterly wonderful about this exhibition is that it does that very locally and specifically, and yet it really broadens it up. We're barely up the stairs, Gayle, before, in fact, we're barely in the door before the wonder and the words of Audre Lorde flooring us as always, right?
Yeah, again, the you forget, like, you can read her books, which I obviously have, but to see her, perform, and just how charismatic she was, it's quite incredible. I mean, the women, you could hear a pin drop watching the film. They're just mesmerised by her.
Yeah, the performance aspect.
Yeah, which I hadn't really thought about, because you always just think of her writing, don't you? And I didn't realise, maybe I should have, that she really put on quite a performance.
Yeah, I knew the writing, and I'd seen photographs I've posted on social media a few times because I'm mesmerised by the pictures of Audre Lorde in Berlin, but to actually see her in situ and what she's saying, but the way she says it. I do love the other video footage in this along with that, Charlotte. I think it's powerful that we have all these different sort of media representations of that activism as well. Yeah,
definitely, because like you say, it's one thing to read something, isn't it, and then another to see it, and then going back to Mary Brooks back and seeing her handwriting, it's like it's emotional. It's like
actual handwriting's there.
And like when you see something like that it can make you feel emotional through seeing somebody's handwriting. But I think I think video is always a great way to sort of display our audio as well when you're listening to something, obviously. But I think in this exhibition, I was saying as well beforehand, that it's just such a great mixture of everything, really. And sometimes I feel like you could go to sort of a gallery or an exhibition and there's too much, or it might just go over my head a bit because it's too academic in how everything's worded, but obviously we're at the University of Dundee, so it's of course academic, but it's just got a realness to it. And you, like you say, you feel it's got the Dundee side and the Scottish side, but then it's got going all over. And I really liked the bit that was on the second floor, and you went through and there was all the big pile of fabrics, and that was a Thailand project.
Absolutely. I love that again, because it's the We Mend project, isn't it? So this is collective activism through knitting and sewing and just making things better in whatever way you can internationally. It's vital, isn't it? It's like you can shout, but also you can just kind of quietly stitch things together and do your best with what you've got.
Yeah, and I like the fact that there's some very serious bits of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Greenham Common, I mean, you know, and the fight and the struggle that people put up there for so long. And then you've got sort of the, you know, against Clause 28, huge section. But there's humour as well. And then among the sort of Clause 28 stuff, there's a sort of homosexual manual and a recruitment card. And it had me howling.
Tell us about it. It's worth coming for this alone.
Yeah.
I know. I want one to hand out. I want to be recruited. It sort of said, you will not wear disgusting clothes from shops like C&A and Benetton anymore. You will refrain. You know, it's just
following fashion orders. Yeah.
Quite right.
Yeah. It is great. Yes, Derek Jarman, we see his presence very much felt upstairs as well. And then again, locally, going down the country a little bit, the Castlemount Women's Projects. And you see a lot that's happening around about 1990. I wasn't aware of this, for my shame, that as part of the whole City of Culture exhibitions or celebrations, there were women's exhibitions, there were women's programmes, there were film festivals, all of which looked very intersectional and really very welcoming. I'm not sure I knew about that as much as I should have done. And again, that's what's vital about these. And Glasgow Women's Library, of course, as always a part of it. We adore you, you know that. And I loved seeing what must be a very early photograph of it, and a kind of very early press release announcing the fact that it was going to exist. And how lucky are we that it does?
Oh, it's just fantastic place, and it's great to see it represented here. It's like seeing an old friend, isn't it? You know, it's like, hi.
I took a picture of it. Oh, that's a little early badge, you know, collector's item.
It was brilliant.
Those shared women's voices are great, but also you can just walk in and be bedazzled by something. Like even when we just walked up the stairs, there are just some superb, brightly coloured paintings, ideas. But the grassroots stuff's always interesting, isn't it, Charlotte? Just seeing that people are doing whatever they can by whatever means and saying what they need to say. Yeah,
definitely. And I think we are still doing that today. And I think obviously feminism and has came a long way, and equality has come a long way, but then still, if you look at it in music, it's still, you know what I mean, all the lineups are still pretty much guys. Or if you look at pretty much all of the support acts on any tour ever, it's pretty much always guys. And like I think it's still, sometimes there aren't enough words to even put into when people go, what's it like being a woman in music, how is it different? And I'm just like, where do I start? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know where to begin, because it is different. Like you can't deny. And like I'm all for equality for everyone, and I want everyone to have a good experience and a good time, but I think it's still so very unfairly represented. I know I've gone right into the music industry there, but
you're absolutely spot on. And do you know what strikes me actually? I feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I've seen you more accurately and more positively represented within Dundee as a musician than I have seen anywhere else. Like the way you headline events up here, or the way you will be part of the opening of the V&A, or you're going to be on the bill with Lewis Capaldi, or you're going to be up there with absolutely, you know, your Clarks, the Danny Wilsons and all the brilliant gang, and you're so much a part of it, and you're on that platform, and you're part of the programming and the creativity and the response to everyone who's come before. Why don't we see that elsewhere? Does that mean you shouldn't be on a higher bill at Transmit, or let's not get too wired into this, but I completely and utterly agree with you. And I wonder if in actual fact that's part of it, is like you're more almost respected up here, right, in your hometown, and you know it's reflected back.
I guess, yeah, I don't know, I think I'm grateful to be a part of like the Dundee scene, or to be included in that, because that's where I started, like going to open mic nights here, and I would see all the bands and stuff, and I would like think, oh my god, to be a part of that. So I'm very grateful for that. I think there's like this thing where people think, and not just in the music industry, I think it's probably across the board, the creative industries or in other industries too, where it's like, right, well, you've got a couple of women there, that'll do. Like there's not, I don't, it's like, no, we could, if all the women are the best artists, or they've got the best songs, then that's the way it is. Or do you know what I mean? I think it's just that you can have one thing and that's it. I don't know. There's not. It's like there's not enough room. Yeah, but like there is
like
enough.
Comedians as they do it with the women as well. But I do think that Dundee men, and I'm going to do a rare thing and be nice here, but I think Dundee men are quite feminist as far as men go. Would you agree, Charlotte?
I would agree.
I think this thing of acceptance, because your music's bloody brilliant, that's why you're accepted. But there's also a bit where Dundee guys don't quite think like, misogyny. I think it's because they can't. Because of the strong women in their lives that wouldn't allow it.
They wouldn't get away with it.
They wouldn't get away with it, basically. So they appreciate women for their talents rather than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that they do. I mean, my life, I'm sure, you were the same. Women were so strong in my family, and they ruled the roost. So I think guys kind of just get used to thinking, respect.
And also you've got the kettle boilers thing as well, haven't you? So you've got the fact that with the jute mills and the way they rung out with music and song and these voices and that collective spirit, effectively, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, that kind of came about because the women worked for lower wages. Yeah. So the men stayed at home and boiled the kettle.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's a different culture, right?
3 times as many women as men worked in the jute mills. Yeah. But it was still patriarchy because the guys were at the top, as you say, the women. But if you asked what my nursery smelled like, Nicola, I would tell you it smelled of Wallace's pies and woodbine.
Oh, wow.
Because my great granny Tierney looked after me. And at lunchtime when the mills come out, when the bummer went, that was the noise to let them know it was lunchtime, the kettle would go on and all my aunties, who weren't really my aunties, would arrive from the mills and with their Wallace's pies. And I would hide under the dining room table. And I'd made, because I was always an entrepreneur, so I made a swear box out of a Kleenex box. And you can imagine the language of these mill workers. Oh, yes. And every so often, the Kleenex box, the swear box would come up.
Beautiful.
And I'd get some more money. And it worked every day.
That's so good.
Every word of it poetry.
Yeah. But this is where, I saw these strong women in action. And they were formidable.
Yeah. And it is just cracking on. It goes back to that. So it's even better, I think, that just doing that, whether it's these pamphlets in the 1840s because they wanted to have their stories or their... Unfortunately, I can't really read very much of it. I want to know what their names are. I want to know what they're writing about. But the fact that they were is also so inspiring. And the jute mills and the songs and your Mary Brooks Banks. I love that they're here. I love that they're here in this context with Audre Lorde welcoming us in and Derek Jarman at the top of the stairs. And it's wonderful that it's all there. Anything finally else stick out for you from this exhibition?
Well, I was like Charlotte about the writing, seeing Mary's writing. It made me quite weepy, actually.
I keep going back. That's what's in my head. I keep going back to that.
No, I agree.
The handwriting for me was incredible. She actually sat there.
It's
Where
so
was
personal,
she?
isn't it? It's like, so you can hear someone's voice, you can see a photo, but like their handwriting is probably as personal as it gets. I guess
I totally agree.
You don't often get to see of a hero, of a legend.
Yeah.
You're like,
I remember she lived in the prefabs out in Adler, and I was about, 11 or 12, and I wanted to go visit her. And I nearly plucked up enough courage, and my dad was going to take me in the car. Wow. But then I chickened. You know how? I was so young. I thought, what did I say?
I know.
But I knew where she lived, and
I'd be the same now.
But for a wee minute, And so to see that writing, and it's in an old notebook, kind of like the book I try to do my poems in.
Really?
Yeah, it was a very similar book.
I love that.
And it just made me, that's what I'm going to remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think so too. I keep harking back to that handwriting, and you touched on it early on. It's funny, isn't it? That really, really personal connection is utterly vital. I'm going to go and have another little wander around. Any more songwriting? Do you constantly write? Charlotte, obviously, your debut album's wonderful. You are at number 2 in the American Billboard album charts, as we've mentioned at the moment, with Rod Wave. We need to hear these Dundee women's songs, though.
I know, yeah, definitely. It's been something on my mind for a while, and there was, I think, 4 or 5 songs in total, and there was one about Griselle Jaffrey, I think.
Oh, yeah.
She was called a witch, and all of that, and so I wrote a song about her, and there was Ethel Moorhead as well. But yeah, there was about maybe 4 or 5 songs, so I'd definitely love to do something with them. I kind of go in stages of like, I'll write loads and loads and loads at once, and then I won't write for a while.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes when the inspiration hits, it hits, and then when it doesn't, it doesn't. But yeah, I could probably like write 20 songs within the space of a very short period of time, and then nothing.
You should call them she tunes.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
Great.
There you go.
Love
There you
it.
go. That'll be your collaboration.
Right.
When Charlotte's at number 1, I'll be like, congratulations on being in the UK Billboard single chart with Be Charlotte, Gayle Anderson, with your collaboration, She Tunes.
She tunes.
I'm in.
Right, let's go and write some She Tunes. Shall we go back and see Mary Brooksbank's writing one more time?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you, and a huge thank you to the Cooper Gallery in Dundee. Let's go see Mary as close as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.